Today on the No Sitting on the Sideline Dad podcast, episode 24. I have a question. Can you teach your kid about money? And can it be fun? Also learn something about money yourself along the way. Let's learn and have some fun with my guest, Joel Salcihai from Stacking the Benjamins podcast. Next on the podcast. Let's do this.
Welcome to the No Sitting on the Sideline Dad podcast, a podcast about a journey of discovery and conversations about not sitting on the sideline of life. Let's get involved. Here's host Joe Foley.
Welcome to another episode of No Sitting on the Sideline Dad podcast. I really want to say thank you for being here. I know, as a dad and parent, our time's limited. We're very busy people. And I want to say thank you for being here. And this is your first time listening? Hey, welcome. This is a podcast where I have a conversation about being a dad or stuff that makes me curious. I guess as a parent, you want to stay on top of things and be curious so you can teach your kids and do different stuff. There'll be topics related to being a dad and a parent. Let's get involved. There's no more sitting on the sideline. You got to get involved. There'll be interviews and topics that I find that my curiosity, if being a dad, I want to learn about these things, or a parent, or a busy adult. So if I want to learn something, maybe you want to learn along with me. We're all going through the same issues. I mean, I hate to say same. Similar issues. We're kind of close. I love being a dad and a parent. And I know this stuff's not easy. I'm not an expert. I'm just like you on a journey, trying to take one day at a time in this crazy world. Topics that I find that my curiosity, if being a dad, I want to learn about these things, or a parent, or a busy adult. So if I want to learn something, maybe you want to learn along with me. We're all going through the same issues. I mean, I hate to say same. Similar issues. We're kind of close. I love being a dad and a parent. And I know this stuff's not easy. I'm not an expert. I'm just like you on a journey, trying to take one day at a time in this crazy world. On today's podcast, my interview with Joel Salcihai from Stacking the Benjamins podcast, where me and Joe talk about how to teach kids about money and how it can be fun and different. It doesn't always have to be serious talk, but make it fun. And also learn about some different apps that help keep kids engaged about money and budgeting. It's stuff that it's really useful. So I don't want to hold you back because it's great information. So let's jump right into the interview. Today on the podcast, my guest is Joel from Stacking the Benjamin podcast, where Joe talks about personal finance. Welcome, Joe. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, I'm glad I made it. I can't believe it.
Thank you for being here. I just one thing. I guess we start off. You're a dad yourself. What is one of the best times you had with your two sons?
You know, it's funny. Well, I have a son and a daughter. Yeah, that's all right. They, I think the best times for us, like, of course, with everybody, your brain immediately goes to vacations that you had, and those were awesome, and I could talk about those. But you know what it is? It's those little times when it's just my spouse Cheryl and Nick and Autumn and sitting around playing board games. I really thought that those times when it's just the four of us and we're having a nice laugh. Another thing that we used to do, we had this book of poetry. This is funny, that was written by, was compiled by a famous actor, and his name escapes me now. It's the guy from Third Rock from the Sun, and he just played on the movie about the royal family, and he played Winston Churchill. There's people, your listeners right now are screaming at their device.
Oh, I know. I watched that movie too about Winston Churchill. I'm like, oh, I can't think of the name.
Yeah,
it's right.
Jonathan Lithgow.
Yes.
Yeah, so John Lithgow put together this book of poetry, and we're not big, I was an English major in college. So I like poetry a little bit, but our kids are really struggling with poetry. So at dinner, we would read a poem. and from this book, and he would kind of then have this discussion about it, and we would read the poem, then we'd talk about it, then we'd read his discussion about it, then during dinner we'd talk through that poem, and that was pretty fun. I actually even thought of a third one, which is when we first moved to Texarkana, where I live now, 8 years ago. My kids were just starting high school, and they knew nobody. And that process at that age is really rough, of going into a brand new school where everybody knows each other except you. And I knew nobody. My wife knew nobody. And so I work from home, but my family would all come home about the same time. And I would set like peanuts and popcorn up we've got like a little bar in our kitchen, and I'd set peanuts and popcorn up, and I made like a playlist of music. And we had this time that we called Joe's Bar and Grill time, where it was kind of our family happy hour. And man, those were fun. And what's funny is that just kind of fizzled out as our kids started to integrate and get in with sports and with, friends and stuff. But for the first maybe 6-7 weeks we lived in Texarkana, I really enjoyed that bonding time that we got.
Well, it's funny that you said about your two kids, and you said they were twins. I'm a twin myself.
Are you?
It's funny. I just had I can twin experience. Being a parent, though, you must. I knew my twin. I used to always argue and instigate fights and stuff like that. I don't know if that was.
My daughter goes from and every parent listening knows this. My daughter goes from level 1 to nuclear, and there's no middle. And my son knows that, and so he will just pick on her just to watch her go nuclear. And it's funny, he doesn't do it as much anymore. They went to 2 different colleges, and they're doing great, and they get along great. But still, when we did our last family vacation this December, we got to the second week, and they'd been together for a long time, and he started picking on her again like the old days. And it actually was kind of funny because even as a dad who in the past hated it, he's looking at me in the back seat.
The finger's going around. I'm not touching you. He's pointed at me, and then
yes, yeah. Don't cross this line in the back seat, right? And then my son will go right, just barely across the line that my daughter drew.
That's funny. I can remember that with my brother too. I was the same way. One thing I'm interesting about your podcast, Stacking Benjamin's podcast. I listened to it. Actually, you're on my playlist of all my podcasts, and I know you talk about finance, and it's very interesting. I don't know if you want to talk about that.
Oh, sure. Yeah. The goal, and this is important when you're teaching kids about money too, is the show's based on the science of play. Our goal is not to teach anything. It's to be more surround sound. So our inspiration was this NPR show, Car Talk, with these 2 guys, Click and Clack, that talk about cars. One of the guys just passed away, but the show is on for a long, long time. You can still download the podcast with back episodes of the, old radio show. But, you can listen to Car Talk and you don't learn anything about a car. you just have a good time with these guys. And I thought there's nobody doing that in the world of money. So it's a fast-paced magazine style show. And the goal is, if we can get people relaxed and having fun and just skim across some of the issues, instead of being like Dave Ramsey or Susie Orman, who are some of the big names who are really gurus and want to be the last word for people. If we're instead the first word and we get you interested by being playful, then you're much more likely to not be afraid of money, because a lot of people are afraid of it. And I think it's the same way when you're teaching kids about money. If you play some things and bring money into the discussion and into the fun, then your kids won't be intimidated by money.
That's a good segue, actually. How about teaching kids about money? How can you make it fun? What's a good way of doing that? I was just curious. Because my son's turning a certain age, and I'm learning myself, so.
It is definitely, and that's an intimidating part there too, Joe, right? Is that parents are intimidated by money. And if you're intimidated by it and you don't think that you're great at it, how do you teach your kid? Well, you kind of learn together, which is pretty neat. So it depends on the age. But I'll tell you when I first got really interested, and we can talk about younger kids because I taught my kids stuff at a young age. We could talk about older kids, but my whole thing about kids and money was born out of frustration. I would come home from work. When I was living in Detroit, I worked outside the house, and I come home from work and every television is on. every light is on in the house. My house is lit up like Disneyland, Joe. And nobody's watching any of the TVs. Everybody's out in the backyard, right?
Mhm.
And I thought, what are we doing? And of course, the air conditioning's on and the doors open. So I made this little energy challenge. And I all we did, we took graph paper, and every month we got the utility bill, we got the electric bill, and we would plot where we were on that graph. And it was amazing when we turned electricity into just something that we didn't think about, into a game, where we tried to get a lower and lower utility bill every month. All of a sudden, my kids were they were hardcore, man. Like I would leave a room for a second and I'd leave the light on, and my daughter would be behind me turning the light off behind me, and then I'd have to turn it back on when I walked back into the room. But just gamifying that was pretty fun. So that was not the first time I taught my kids about money, but that was the first time that I realized that turning everything into a game would make it more fun for me and for them.
That's interesting. I mean, I haven't seen my utility bill going, that's a graph. I mean, I'm like, I always like to see when the lower number comes in, when the bill comes in going, yeah, I lower than last month.
Right. Yeah. And it's funny because you think that kids wouldn't, they're not really invested in it because they're not paying the bill. But even then, just bringing them into that's a cool thing. I also did the same thing at the grocery store. When you go to the grocery store, there's the price of the item, but then if you look at the rack just below the price, there's a little thing that tells the people at the store what's supposed to be sitting there, and they have the price per unit. So as an example, on toilet paper, they will tell you for each little square of toilet paper what you're paying. And so it's funny because we would look at the price tag. So I took my kids to the store, and for most families, a trip to the grocery store with your kids is complete hell. They ask for a bunch of stuff that you don't want them to have. You get to the place where you're finally paying, and they're either all over the store and you're trying to rein them in while you're also trying to check out, or they're asking for all the candy in the candy aisle. Instead, when we had them first clip coupons with us and look online, now increasingly online, for coupons for things that we were already going to buy. So we make the list together. We clip the coupons together. Then when we're looking at the sales, when we look at the sale price versus other items that are lined up next to it, we look at the cost. A lot of the time, the sale that we had wasn't as good a price as a price of a competing thing down the aisle. So it became this really fun educational thing, and I would escape the grocery store with my sanity and with a little bit of fun, with the kids who were really, man, it was funny how helpful they became too when we did it that way, instead of being, instead of working against me.
What's so good? I mean, even couponing can be an art in itself.
Yeah, and it really can. And I, frankly, I'm not that good at it. And I look at usually time versus money. I rarely recommend, Joe, that people do couponing because it just, if I'm gonna spend 20 minutes chasing 25 cents or $1 versus spend that same amount of time out earning $1 doing what I'm good at, I'm not going to do it. But with kids, it's a whole different thing. Because with kids, now I'm teaching them that for them, heck, they're not earning any money, right? My kid's not going to do something else with that time. So it's something constructive I can do with them that saves the kids some money. Target has the Cartwheel app, which is pretty fun. We have an Albertsons grocery store which is a big regional chain, but I know Kroger has the same thing. They have their app. So we make the list. I send my kids to the app if they're old enough to know the app. If not, you grab the Sunday paper. They still have coupons in the Sunday paper that you can physically cut out or look for deals. And I send them on that goose chase. That probably starts around 7 years old. Pre 7, it's and even at 7, it's a little tough. But around 7, that's when I think you can really start getting in there with some fun grocery store family activity.
It's fun. I mean, I take my son 3. Daddy, I want that. No, you can't.
Right.
But can I have a treat? No. What's that?
I'll tell you what's fun with kids, and maybe it's a little older than 3. One of the first lessons that we did is just the difference in types of money. So we'd take different coins, and as soon as I know the kid's not going to put the coins in their mouth anymore, we start looking at, because people don't realize, your kid doesn't understand that even though a dime is smaller than a nickel in the United States, it's worth more money. And you see these jokes about, a kid gives, does a trade with somebody else, 1 dime for 3 pennies, because he thinks 3's more than 1. Mm-hmm. So heck, I got 3 pennies and I gave this guy this one little tiny thing, and you end up losing money. So we started talking about the different denominations, and that's cool on a couple levels. It's cool because you're working with numbers. So anytime I can work with numbers, a 1, a 5, a 10, for different bills, and then for 1 penny, nickel with 5 pennies, is worth 5 pennies. A dime is worth 10 pennies. Those are kind of fun. And we would just put a bunch of coins and bills into a bowl, and then we'd have our kids take one out, and they would both try to guess what that was worth. And that was a fun little game.
Well, it's fun because nowadays it seems like a lot of people use like debit cards and pay for their groceries and stuff like that. It almost seems like cash and coins are going away. I don't know. I don't know if that's, you see the change. I very rarely have cash. I always seem to use my debit card. And I don't know how to teach kids about that stuff too.
Well, and that's a big problem, right? Because kids don't get the tactile feel of money. And it's also a problem age-wise, because I'm 49 years old. I grew up in a cash-based system. And when people started telling me that I needed to teach my kids about plastic, well, you and I know plastic is horrible, right? I'm not going to teach my kids about plastic, but you're right, Joe. All kids know now is plastic. And in the future, there's going to be less and less cash out there. So I have to teach them plastic, because that's their reality. So I like this thing called FAMZoo. Now, the bad news about FAMZoo is there is a little fee that comes with it, but everybody in your family gets a debit card, and you load the debit card directly from Dad's bank account. So the cool thing about FAMZoo that I really like is that it's not, the kid doesn't really have a separate account. What FAMZoo does is it kind of partitions a little piece of your account and gives the kid access to a little bit of yours. So there's really not a transfer that happens. You can do some cool things with FAMZoo. You can give kids allowances using FAMZoo. I really like the interface. You can have them track stocks. Let's say as a family, you decide to track Microsoft stock. You can put an amount of money in their account that kind of tracks the stock, and then have the amount of money go up. Now, the bad news is you've got to continually put more money in to track the stock going up, right? You can pay kids interest on savings. In other words, if I say, hey, I want to give my kid a 1% interest rate or a 5% interest rate, or give them a bonus, I can pay bonuses out, pay interest out. I can also see the second that they spend money using their debit card, as a parent, I can see everything that they spend. I can help them set up a budget. So FAMZoo has a small fee. I don't remember what the fee is, but it's not big. But I think that's the premier place to teach kids about money using plastic.
I'll make sure I have that in the show notes. That sounds interesting. I want to check that out myself. Another thing, I guess, teaching. Well, what is too young? What is the age appropriate to start teaching kids about allowance? Would it be appropriate? I was just curious.
Boy, well, this is the most. I'm groaning because this is the most controversial area. Everybody has an opinion about allowances, right? And I like starting allowances young, and I like them so even at 5 years old, having an allowance, and then on that grocery store visit, kids can spend part of their allowance. Now, a few things. I don't believe in giving allowances for chores that are chores that help out around the house. You help out around the house because you're a member of the family, right? The allowance has nothing to do with being a member of this family. It's for other stuff. And actually, a friend of mine, she has a fun website for kids and teaching kids about money called The Heavy Purse. Shannon Ryan. Shannon talks about, she posts a jobs board. This is pretty neat. So she doesn't give a set allowance per se. She posts a jobs board where I need this job done. talk to mom for details, and here's how much it pays. I need this job's done. I need this one done. And as kids, yeah, right.
Great idea.
And so then the kid, and then the kid applies for the job. The kid tells Shannon how the job's going to get done, and then she inspects the job, and then she pays based on the job. I never did that. I paid a set allowance that is, and this is where people are going to start coughing. I pay per week double the amount of money that the child of the child's age. So in other words, a 6-year-old, $12 a week. And I know there's somebody driving down the road, or they're out on their run or walk with the dog, and they're yelling at the radio right now, Joe, going, what the hell does a 6-year-old need $12 a week for?
Sorry, I'm laughing. Yeah,
They don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, they seriously don't. But here's the deal. Personal story. When I got to college, I walked into Mark Clark Hall. I was at the Citadel, the Military College of South Carolina. And I walked into Mark Clark Hall. I'd never really been, my parents, wonderful people, never taught me anything about money. And I was never trusted with more money than I quote needed. I walked into Mark Clark Hall. There was an American Express table. They were giving away like a stadium blanket if I signed up for an American Express card. To make this long story really short, within 2 months, I completely destroyed my credit. I'd only been away from home for 2 months, and I destroyed everything because I wasn't trusted with that kind of money before. And when I finally had it, and I'm 18 years old and on my own, I'm doing stupid stuff with an American Express card. So kids don't need it. And if you're only going to give a 6-year-old $12 a week, you're doing it wrong. Because what you have to do, the bigger emphasis is on the parenting half of this, which is my kid has $12 a week. Now, when we go to a movie, Junior has to buy their own concessions, has to buy their popcorn, which, as you know, is every bit as expensive as the movie now. It's crazy. If they want something at the grocery store, they have to buy it themselves. If they go to birthday parties, they buy the gift for their friend. And so instead of just saying, hey, can we get my friend the super duper gift that costs a lot of money? And I don't care because it's not my cash. Junior's buying it with their cash. You take the family on a trip to Walt Disney World, where every single, or even a regional theme park, where every single ride ends in a gift shop. Well, they take their money and they use it for that thing. So saving money for big events that are coming up, having that discussion, and then deciding to wisely spend money. And here's what's going to happen, Joe. And this happened with my daughter. My son and my daughter spent money completely differently when we started this program. My son was a money hoarder. He still is. You give him $5, it is gone. And he will look you in the eye and he'll say, yeah, I don't have any money. Yes, you do. I just gave you $5. I don't have any money. So he's always going to be very tight fisted. My daughter blows money the second she gets it. Or she used to rather. My initial inclination as a parent was to stop her from doing that. And I'll tell you, the way that my daughter got better with money was I didn't stop her, because I can either have her make a dumb move with $5 today or $10 or $15, or she's going to make a dumb move like I did with $500. Mm-hmm. So teach them with these smaller amounts. And I knew she was buying junk at the store that was going to be destroyed immediately, or she would never play with it, but I let her buy it. But then here's where the parenting came in. 2 weeks later, I had to circle back around and say, hey, you have no money now. And where's that thing that you wasted your money on? Oh, it's broken and it's in the trash because you bought junk. So what are you going to do differently next time? And we'd have a fantastic discussion. And my daughter's still a spender, but man, she is thrifty. She loves clothing, but she shops at thrift stores, and she has a budget, and she makes sure that she has an emergency fund. It's a pretty amazing kid.
How do you, since it's our budgeting, they mentioned budget, what's the tips on teaching how to budget? I mean, that's a big issue. I think as some parents don't really know how to do it because never really taught it, and how they can teach their kids.
Right. Parents don't do it themselves, which is why I like having a family meeting about money, and I like involving kids in a piece of that meeting. Because first of all, budgets are about communication first. It's about saying out loud what our family's priorities are, what it is that we've got coming up on the calendar, and then making sure we have a plan for those things. It can be a line item budget. Like most people, when they think budget, they think line item by line item. It doesn't have to be that. It has to be, hey, my daughter's name's Autumn. Autumn, you're going to this birthday party in 2 weeks. How much money do you want to spend on your friend's gift? X amount of money. How much do you have now? What other things do you have coming up? And making sure that there's money there for those priorities. Really, that's all budgeting is making sure that you have a fence around your money so that you can play like heck inside the fence, but you know where the fence is. The big problem with a lot of parents and with kids is nobody knows where the fence is, right? Yeah. And at its heart, that's the budget. Now, I'll say this. A lot of times in a family meeting, parents will have some serious talks about serious things going on with family money. You don't want to scare your children at the family meeting. Don't involve them in things that involve bankruptcy or involve, I'm not sure how we're going to make that payment, how we're going to keep the lights on. That type of stuff is mom and dad stuff. But certainly the things I talked about, like the utility bills and the credit card bill coming in, whatever bills there are, talking through the bills and, hey, the money comes out of our checking account to get that. And what's our strategy for these things coming up? We've got school clothes coming up. We've got this other thing coming up. What are the priorities? Involving the kids and having them hear those discussions, I think is really valuable.
I was curious. A lot of I use I think it's Mint for my budget. What are some good apps for like budgeting, family budgeting?
Yeah, I really like Mint. Mint is good. The cool thing about Mint, if people don't use it, that I really liked when I used Mint, and the other one I'm going to give you does the same thing, and I think it's even a little more robust. I like the fact that Mint would tell me at a restaurant when I went over my restaurant budget. So what's cool is that, and you already know this, Joe, if you use Mint, that you can set parameters for each part of your budget. And so if I'm at a gas station and I just spent more money than my gas budget allows, Mint will send me a quick text that says, "Hey, you're over the line," and that always makes me groan, but in a good way. Because once again, I know where the fence is. I like this cool newer app called Clarity Money. And Clarity Money was developed by Michael Dell's brother. Michael Dell from the Dell Computer Company. Adam Dell created Clarity Money. And this app is growing like a weed because it's Mint on steroids. I think it does a better job of giving you suggestions about how to live your life. It gives you better ideas for, hey, you did this with your money. Here's something you could have done that was a better idea. It also is a little more well-rounded. So Clarity Money is also free. So I would check out either Mint or Clarity Money when it comes to budgeting apps. By the way, I talked earlier a little bit about FAMZoo. Mm-hmm. For parents out there and for older kids. I like Chime Bank. So Chime is this internet bank. It's a bank account. And think about this. When's the last time you actually went into a bank?
A long time ago.
Chime does this cool thing that a lot of people might know. Bank of America does this. But Chime's not the evil empire like Bank of America is. What Chime does is it comes with a debit card, like every checking account does, or every saving. Most accounts have a debit card. But when you buy something using that card, you can round up. So let's say you round up to the nearest $5. You can tell it where you want to round up to, the next $5, the next dollar, whatever. And then all the money that got rounded up in a week, Chime gives you a 10% bonus on all that roundup money. So the more money that you round up to move into your own personal savings whenever you go out and spend money, the more money that you have in your pocket. And so that's a great introduction for older kids. Once they get past FAMZoo, maybe late high school and college age kids. And then also for parents, heck, if I can have a bank with a debit card and I can teach myself good savings habits by rounding up my bills and saving the difference, that's a good thing.
Oh, it's always good when it's money in the bank savings account. That's a good idea. I check that one out. Another thing I'd like to talk about, since you're about personal finance, is any good tips on getting rid of debt? Like people have personal debt, like credit cards, car loans and stuff like that. I just wonder if you had any tips on that.
Yeah, great question, because most people listening to this have debt, and there's two issues with debt. I'll give you some hacks today to help people get out of debt, but really we want to look at the root of the problem, because a lot of times when I was a financial planner for 16 years, and when I was doing that, I would help people get out of debt. And if I didn't give them the tools to handle the real problem, they get right back into it. So we need to really focus on, why did you get into debt? And that involves a lot of the stuff we already talked about, Joe. Having the budget, know where the fence is, living inside your means, setting up a budget that works for you. Usually it's communication, but for some people it's a line item budget where, it's like a series of envelopes. I've got $20 in the envelope for this, $50 in the envelope for this. And once I go over, well, I can't go over. That envelope has that amount of money. When you get out of debt, people do a few things wrong. They make level payments to all the debts. In other words, I'm going to put $50 toward every single debt. That's bad. Mm-hmm. The second thing is they let their emotions get in the way instead of doing the logical thing. In other words, I really don't like this company, so I'm going to pay them off first, even though they have a really low interest rate. Or I took a loan from a family member at 0% interest, and I have all these credit cards. I'm going to pay the family member off first because that'll make me feel better. Okay. Your family member, it's hard for a family member to disown you. And don't get me wrong. There's some times where you have to pay the family member off, but usually the family member is going to be a little more lenient. The credit card company's not. So, we want to attack one debt. And normally it's going to be the debt with the highest interest rate first. Now, I'll tell you when we don't do that. At the beginning, we might need some wins. So I might encourage someone to attack some small debts first and get them paid off, because behaviorally, people get this great feeling when they pay off a debt. You get this huge feeling, and that makes it so that you keep doing it, so that you keep getting out of debt. So pay off either small balance ones or go for the one with the highest interest rate first. Once you get one paid off, and just focus on one. Once you get one paid off, take the money you were putting toward it. Let's say you're putting $50 a month toward a Visa and you got it paid off. Take that $50 and add it to the minimal amount you were paying on MasterCard, and now you're leveling more money. And this method, Dave Ramsey, who's a big finance guru, calls the snowball method, where every time you pay off a loan, you're adding that to the snowball, and the snowball is rolling faster and faster, and you get out of debt. But pay as little money to the man as possible. Also, if you have money that's in collections already, collection agencies are a real pain. They'll call you over and over and they'll harass you. That's fine. They've already done the damage that they're going to do. Once a bill gets written off and it goes to collections, it no longer hurts. Well, it's already hurt your credit. It's not going to hurt it any more than it's already hurt. You need to stay current on the other stuff. So I generally would tell people, stuff in collections, do whatever you have to do for them at a minimal amount. But then the stuff that's current, make sure that stays current, because when it comes to your credit score, staying current on your bills is number one.
Okay, that's an interesting way of doing that, and it's a very good tip, actually. I'm really interested. I think a lot of people get some good information from that.
Yeah, it's getting out of debt is all about controlling your mind, right? Because it's so frustrating. It is, and it seems to take people forever. We've interviewed people on our show where they've paid off $100,000 in credit card debt, and I can't imagine having $100,000 in credit card debt. But good for them to get out from under it.
Yeah, the $100,000 credit card debt seems like you're just like looking up, and it's like in the bottom of the ocean, looking up top, and you can see where you can get out of the ocean where the air is, but it seems like a long swim up there.
Yeah. But it's a little like that story about eating an elephant, right? Just focus on one bite at a time, baby.
Exactly. One bite at a time. I was just wrapping up, I guess. Final thoughts. Anything you want to anything you want to think about, or before we wrap it up?
Yeah. You know what else I like for families? And I mentioned this just a little bit with my kids, Joe. I love board games. And board games are a great way to introduce kids to money and economic concepts. So there is an older version of Monopoly Junior. I'm not a big fan of the game Monopoly, but I do like Monopoly Junior a lot. And for my kids, that taught them how to make change. It taught them the difference in the value of different bills. I like an older one, which was it was a theme park. and you can still get it, even though that's not the current version in print. But that's my favorite. I also like, for older kids, there's a cool game called Stockpile, which is like an introduction to stocks and bonds. Now, none of these things, Joe, work the way that the world really works. But the goal, once again, much like the Stacking Benjamin show, you're just trying to get the kids interested, right? You're not trying to teach them everything all at once. You're just trying to get them whet their appetite, so they want to have the serious discussion later. So Stockpile is a fun game for kids. There's a cool game called Acquire, which is like mergers and acquisitions. You've got companies, and companies swallow other companies. That's for older kids. A fun game called Modern Art, where art prices go up and down. You bid on painters, and depending on how prestigious this painter is, it might be worth more money or worth less money. I really enjoy board games when it comes to teaching kids about money. I don't like games like Monopoly because they're really cutthroat. There's a whole new world of board games out there. A great resource is a website called BoardGameGeek.com. And millions of people go there a day. It's amazing how many people love board games. I was surprised when I first found Board Game Geek. But if all you know is the Target aisle of board games, and you've never heard of games like Settlers of Catan or Ticket to Ride, some of the new games out there, you're really missing out on some real fun.
Well, I had something I got to say. I just actually talked to the cashier at the grocery store this weekend. Before, I used to work at a grocery store, and they just when I first left there about 17 years ago, just put the machine in for when she gives you change, you can see the dollar bills, the coins. It's not like in the old days you had to think about it, and the lost out of counting change back. I guess Monopoly was
right.
The lost, and it's like you count the change back. I'm like, they don't do that anymore. They just see pitches and they hand you.
I know.
Yeah,
isn't that weird? I remember being in second or third grade, and we were having this cool discussion about the future. And listen to this, and this is old guy talk now, Joe. But they were telling me about how you wouldn't have a cashier. You would just scan your stuff, and you could put it in the bag yourself. And I thought, there is no way we're ever going to scan groceries ourselves. That is amazing. That's the most incredible thing ever. But you're right. Nobody makes change anymore. And Monopoly Junior is really good at teaching that. Oh, there's another one too. I like instead of Monopoly, I like a game called Power Grid, where speaking of utility companies, you're growing utility companies across the United States. And at first it doesn't feel like you're playing Monopoly, but after you play a full game, you're like, well, this really is Monopoly. So.
Hey, I have a long list of links I got to put into the show notes.
I'm sorry. I'm really messing up.
No. I appreciate it, because I got a lot of stuff I want to check out tonight once I have an opportunity. Final thoughts, where they can get in touch with you.
Sure. The Stacking Benjamin show is every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We're lucky. Kiplinger Magazine, which is a big magazine in our area, personal finance, called us Best Podcast. We're up for an award in August, Best Business Podcast at the Academy of Podcasters Awards, which are going to be in Anaheim in August this year. So I think that means that it's a good show, Joe. I hope it's a good show. We work hard on it. Yeah, but thank you. But we work hard at having fun. So people that are worried about getting super duper great advice, our show's not the best place for that. We jokingly tell people that if you learn something listening to the Stacking Benjamin show, that's your own problem. Keep it to yourself. But if you just want to have money surround sound and have it be more of a playful listen, well, then Stacking Benjamin's is a good place to go.
Well, thank you very much for being on the podcast. I really do praise Joe, and I'd say thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, man.
Have a good day. Well, that's all I have for this episode. I want to say thank you for joining me on the No Sitting on the Sideline Debit podcast. I really want to say thank you to Joel Salcia here from the Stacking the Benjamin podcast. I really learned a lot today, and hope you did too. Some takeaways, some different apps and budgeting and different ways about talking about debt and how to teach kids about money in different ways. Go check out Joe's podcast over at stackingthebenjamins.com. I guess learning a lot from this today, I need some work myself. And I really take away a lot of useful tips and apps. You can find all the show links in the show notes about all the apps we talked about in this episode. Also, You can find this episode at nosittingonthesideline.com/24. Please comment on the podcast. All comments help improve the podcast, or you just want to say hello. Right over there, too, especially if you look at the screen, there's an app called SpeakPipe. Leave a message. I'd like to hear from you. Well, you can find all my contact and social information at nosittingonthesideline.com/contact. It's nice. Reach out and say hello. I really would like to talk to you. So please subscribe to my email list and find out about what upcoming guests and information about the podcast. Well, thank you for your time. Until next time, have fun. Get involved with your children. Life is short. Connect to many people you can and enjoy life. God bless. Take care. See ya.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. Please subscribe to the newsletter to receive updates of the show and helpful and useful tips. This has been a production of Foley 42 Media.